A friend recently posted on her Facebook status page that she just adulted by putting back a package of sliced roast beef that cost $11.89 and picked up one that cost $10.34. Another friend, tired of home ownership because she has ongoing electrical and plumbing problems and recently her furnace needed a major overhaul, posted on her Facebook page, "I can't adult today." It's a strange use of the word adult, using adult as a verb instead of a noun. And I admit, it sounds a little strange to my ears as well, but it captures exactly what the speaker is communicating. Once a person reaches the age that classifies them as an adult, there is no turning back the clock. But by saying they adulted means they or someone else displayed a responsible adult behavior. And naturally, the reverse holds true. If a person says they can't adult today, it means they are saying they cannot handle the responsibility of being an adult, or they just don't want the responsibility. Utilizing this new trend, which uses the word adult as a verb, Pastor John Polvolitz wrote an online article in which he uses the word Christian as though it were a verb as well, claiming that he just can't Christian anymore. After making this claim, he explained his reason for his conclusion, writing, "I can no longer be tethered to this thing that is so toxic and so painful to so many. I can't wade through any more bad theology and predatory behavior from pulpit-pounding pastors who seem solely burned to exclude and to wound and to do harm. I can't sift through all the malice and bitterness masquerading as Christianity to try to find what of it is left worth keeping. I can't do any more face-palming while reading celebrity evangelist tweets or seeing the viral video of joyless people spewing racist fast food restaurant rants while saying they follow the same Jesus I do. I can't apologize anymore for people who are willfully hurting other human beings in the name of a God they preach as love. I can't align myself with the human rights violations and overt racism and rabid nationalism that is defining Christianity in America. If being a Christian now means demonizing immigrants and worshiping America, count me out. I want to stand with compassionate human beings no matter where they come from and what they call themselves, as long as they emulate Jesus." There are some Christians, like Pastor John, who no longer want lumped together with all those fanatical Christians, especially the ones who preach peace, love, and acceptance, yet create gender, race, and class barriers which prevent persons from being able to join fully or participate fully in the life of Christ. But this is not the first time in Christianity's history to have been distorted and misrepresented by misguided persons. Early in the Apostle Paul's career, he encountered misguided Christians as well. In Paul's view, these persons created such barricades with their unreasonable mandates or misguided ignoramuses. Perhaps the plural of that is ignorami? Ignoramuses. In his letter to the new Christians, Paul warned them, saying they needed to keep an eye on those who cause dissensions and offense in opposition to the teaching that you have learned. For such people do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. And by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of many. Despite his warning, the misguided ignoramuses had infiltrated and spread discord, even within the churches Paul founded. Though Paul was heartbroken and discouraged by the fractions that took place in the early church due to arguments over dogma and theological practices, and even about how to apply the gospel, he never became so distraught over the direction Christianity was going that he ever stopped referring to himself as a Christian. As far as we know, he never thought of leaving the faith, as so many have done. So many, in fact, we have given them a title, nuns. Nuns are those who believe in God and believe in Jesus, but no longer refer to themselves as Christians, and they have stopped attending church or any organized form of religion. And this would have saddened Paul, because instead of leaving Christianity, he began a letter-writing campaign to encourage congregations to clothe themselves with the Spirit of God, writing, "It is my eager expectation and hope that by speaking with all boldness, Christ will be exalted now as always in my body. For to me, living is Christ." Paul encouraged the congregations to return to the model of care that Jesus modeled during his lifetime when he invited sinners and saints into his midst. This theme of caring for others and removing barriers for people remained consistent with Paul, even as he sensed that his life was going to end, as we encounter in our reading from 2 Timothy today. When Paul wrote this letter, Roman officials had arrested and charged him with disturbing the Pax Romana, that is, the peace of Rome, with his gospel teachings. Suspecting that any day could be his last, he wrote, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." It's amazing that even as Paul was facing death, he still managed to proclaim, "Another day to live for Christ." With this passage about Paul's actions, it has caused me to pause and ponder some of my own ideas that I've been trying to process lately. Especially when earlier in this week, before I encountered Pastor John's letter, I was asked if I was a pastor by a stranger. Naturally, I said, "I am." And then they asked, "Are you a Christian?" I wasn't sure how to respond to that follow-up question because it's kind of a given. If you're a pastor, then you're a Christian, right? So then I was thinking, okay, I don't know what they were thinking. So I just looked at them with a puzzled expression. And so they clarified, saying, "I want to know if you're one of those Christians. You know, the ones we read about on social media." And I'm sure we all know those ones. They claim they love Christ, and they sell wedding cakes, but refuse to bake one for a loving couple. Or was I one of those Christians who claim that Jesus loved all the children of the world, but I'm okay that our government locks children and infants in cages and separates them from their parents? She asked me if I was one of those types of Christians. And her question troubled me, because as a pastor and as Christians gathered in this room, how are we viewed by outsiders when persons claiming to be Christian aren't representing what Jesus stood for? Furthermore, I began to wonder, when politicians claim they are Christian but advocate for ideas that are far from what Jesus would have done or said, what response should we have? What should we do? Should we leave Christianity, as Pastor John suggested in his letter? Should we become a nun? Not the N-U-N kind, the N-O-N-E kind. As I said earlier, a lot of persons already have made that shift. And according to Christian Smith, a religious and sociology professor at the University of Notre Dame, he says this trend began in the 1990s, and the cynicism toward religious institutions will continue to increase. So do we continue to go that way, or do we stick with Christianity, but look for a way to rebrand our image or our message? Or maybe going slightly backward, would simply abandoning the word Christianity and adopting a new name help? Would there be a way to disassociate ourselves with those who don't represent God or our faith? And then, processing all of that, we come upon this voice of inspiration that appears in our reading this morning. Paul's letter to Timothy challenges us to reconsider all of these ideas. Paul essentially asks, why give up your identity due to the actions and words of some misguided souls? Rather, Paul claimed we need to retain our Christian title, and he suggested that we need to go further. He said we need to put Christianity into practice, which in effect would make the word Christian a verb. We need a Christian so that outsiders can see what true Christianity is all about. We need to mirror Jesus and display his image in our actions and behaviors and words. And doing that means we're not about rejecting people. Instead, we're about building hospitals and schools and care facilities. We're about developing programs to lift the poor out of poverty and help the needy. We're about working with refugees and helping them get housing. We're about caring for addicts and the mentally ill. We're about caring for elders and delivering food to them and helping them with basic needs. We are about planning to provide mats and blankets and pillows to those who choose to live outdoors. We can't let those who claim to be Christian but aren't Christianing to derail us from our mission about what we are to do for others as we follow Jesus. In regard to giving up our identity as Christians, Paul would encourage us not to do so. He would remind us, as he reminded Timothy, that we should do our best to present ourselves to God as one approved by God, a worker who has not any reason for shame. Today, Christ calls us to use our actions to reveal that he is in our life and not to get into verbal jousts with those who are misguided. After all, there seems to be plenty of judgment going around these days. So instead of being judgmental, it's time to open our hands to the hands of Christ who reached out to a fallen world. So we also need to teach and reach out to those who are desperate to see the living Christ in our world, making visible his generosity, his kindness, and his love. Christianity needs persons who take seriously Jesus' instructions that we are responsible for providing service to others, not so that we are exalted, but rather so that people receive God's presence. Our culture, our world, the people around us need to see Christians actually living as Jesus lived and utilizing our words to offer care, not hate, not fighting, not squabbling over dogma or politics. Rather, they want to know that God cares for them and that we are mirroring God's love. Today, Jesus initiates the call to people who can say, I will follow Jesus. I can Christian today. This way, through us, Christ is visible in the world. And the only way that happens is through us, with God's help. Committing to Christianing, we are able to proudly proclaim what Paul and all the saints who came before us and are with us here in this room today can proclaim proudly. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith because I Christianed.